Hey, it's Zennial Gamer, and we're back with another Labyrinth video today. This time we're going to be going through the different stages, the normal, the rescue, the time limit, all that. I'm going to be showing you the hell mode teams that I use, and then I'm going to be talking you through the thought process with each of those teams. So if you don't have the exact same monsters, hopefully you can find something similar to replicate them. So we're going to start off with time limit. I will finish out this stage. I'll probably retreat out of a couple of the stages, so since I've only got 4 lanterns and there's 6 different types of stages. Okay, so for this first stage we're going to talk about, it's going to be the time limit stage, the one where you're clearing waves in 3 minutes. So the team that I'm showing you right now will typically clear wave 16 or 17 for me. I've cleared 18 a couple of times. But it's usually going to clear either 16 or 17, and that's about as far as it goes. So this team is built around 2 concepts. To start off with, I think a lot of people who do the time limit stages try and go for all AoE attack monsters. It makes sense because the idea is to kill as many monsters as quickly as you can. But ultimately, the AoE type attack monsters, except for the homunculus, they all have a skill 1 attack that is not going to attack AoE, and what that does is it creates a gap for the enemy monsters to attack you. That eats up a lot of time against that 3-minute time limit, and in the later stages it can mean that you die. So what we're trying to do here, we're using the homunculus because all 3 of his attacks are going to be AoE, but also because he's got manipulations. So his skill 1 has a chance to freeze, his skill 2 absorbs attack bar, his skill 3 gives the damage over time. And then other than him, the closest thing I have to an AoE attacker is the Belager. Now the reason I'm using Belager is twofold. One is that I'm getting the 44% attack lead from him. 2 is that because the volume of monsters we're killing here means that Belager is always going to be at full stack. Fran serves a couple of purposes. The 50% attack buff is a big deal on all of the other monsters that I'm using, but especially on Belager and the homunculus. And then obviously the immunity and the healing is what allows me to sustain through the later levels. It's probably only a difference between a couple of levels. If I replaced Fran with a damage dealer, I'd probably get to the same 15, 16 mark. If I started to get hit on turn 16, I might not survive. Now the last 2 monsters in this comp are Verd and Rauk. The Verd is basically there to turn cycle Belager because my Belager is very slow. He's built for BJ, as I imagine most of yours will be. And so that 128 speed I think he has would not be enough to really effectively attack on a consistent basis, and then he wouldn't serve the same purpose. So the Verd, by turn cycling him, is allowing him to get out a lot more of those attacks. And then the Rauk is pretty much the same reason he's used in PvE everywhere, because he turn cycles on his own. Even though he's not an AoE attacker, every time he finishes a kill, he gets another attack. He also offers me defense break, and he offers me the team up. And every time the team up takes the homunculus, I get an AoE attack, and I get a chance to freeze all of the enemy monsters. So the idea behind this team is basically we're doing a combination of we're turn cycling our Belager, and we're turn cycling our homunculus. We're using a little bit of crowd control with the homunculus, and then we're just turn cycling our entire team with the Verd. So as you can see in the background, I'm going to die out on this wave. Actually, I might have beaten this wave if I had time. I certainly wouldn't have gone any further once I lost the Belager. But we made it to wave 18 right there. And depending on the enemies you're facing, the only time I really don't make it to at least 17 or 18 is the one stage that has the... I don't remember the name of the monster, but it's the wind dog. Like a Marna Kamoon. I don't know if I've never built him, so I don't know the name of the monster, but he resurrects and comes back with 100% skill and shield. So he basically cuts you. And that's the only one that won't make, and that one makes it to, I think, stage 16, so it's still a hell mode team. Okay, before I move on to the next stage, I forgot to show the runes of this team, so let me just cycle through the runes right here. So Belager is obviously built for BJ. You'll notice that his crit rate is really high, and that's if you've seen Ace's video about a second placement BJ team, you need at least 81 crit rate for that. But other than the above average crit rate, I think everything else is pretty normal. My homunculus is on the low side in attack because he's on a speed rage 2 rune. And that's because I'm setting up a damage over time TOA team that I'm going to experiment with if and when I ever get Rika skilled up. So the homunculus could definitely have more damage in exchange for some speed. He also could have a little bit more accuracy. Well, he'll need more accuracy if I do the TOA team. Right now, he's a Feynman farmer. So our Fran is pretty consistent with, I think, my stage of the game, Fran's in the Violent Will. Maybe a little bit faster than some people can do in Violent, but that would be fine. As long as she's the fastest monster on your team, it won't be any big deal for this stage. The Rauk is slow. He does have the 100 crit rate. If you've seen the Dragon B10 video I built, that's why he's in this particular build. But the other stats, other than the 100 crit rate, should be pretty achievable, I think, for most people. And then the Verd is kind of slow, especially anybody who's using Verd in PvP. He'd normally probably be a little bit higher. And obviously the crit rate, most people go for 100. Since we have the separate RTA runes, I stole a couple of Verd's runes, dropped them to 85 for the rare occasion where I use them in something like Guild Wars Siege. 85 is plenty because I just target a wind monster. Okay, so you can see my speed limit team in the background. Obviously, there is no replacement for Leo, so we're not going to do the fight with this team. I just pulled Leo like a week and a half ago, by the way. I was really stoked about that. Just for Labyrinth, like more than anything else. But I figured I'd start by showing you the team. Annabelle should be in the leader slot. I figured I'd start by showing you this particular team, and then I'm going to go back to the old team that I used for speed limit, and we will kind of talk through the strategy of that team. So in this team with the Leo, what we did was just build an auto team. It's kind of slow, but it's fine. It's auto. So we've got 2 healers. We've got 2 AoE defense breakers with the Mantora and the Annabelle. We've got AoE stun with the Mantora. We've got Leo for the obvious reasons. And then we've got our homunculus, who's the primary damage dealer, and also because he resurrects. So the stats of the other monsters, just in case you want to see them. Annabelle is on Violent Energy. I don't use her all that often in PvP. But of course, with your Annabelles, you always want to get some extra attack in there, and then you want them to be kind of tanky. You'd usually want them to have more resistance than mine does, and probably just a hair more accuracy. But again, she's not a primary PvP monster for me. Leo is unskilled. As I said, I just got him. So this is the build I've got for him, and no real comments on that. So far, I really haven't used him anywhere except for Labyrinth. So Mantora, I do like to invest a little bit in. I actually use my Mantora a lot. I think he's a very underused and underrated monster. I've mentioned this before. And I will use him in PvP. I use him everywhere in PvE. Well, not everywhere, but I use him in a lot of places in PvE, and then I do use him in PvP as well. Okay, so as you can see, the old team was actually not that different. The couple of changes are that we have our Xingshi in and we have our Theomars in. Now we're using Theo over the water homunculus here because we're going to get attacked and we need something that can survive. We want to have at least 1 second water monster because we don't want them to all focus on Theo. We want to split the damage from the wind monsters between our 2 water monsters as best we can. We need a couple of healers in there to keep everybody alive. We've got Mantora in there for the AoE defense break, also for AoE stuns and slow. The slow is a really big deal in this speed limit stage because once the enemy is slowed, you'll be able to lap past them and turn cycle a little bit. And then we're using Xingshi for more of that control. So he's going to give me the HP lead, which is good. He's going to draw all the damage from fire dealers, and I can out-heal all of that between Annabelle and Fran, which is also really good. And then his passive, and if you're not familiar with the Xingshi passive, 35% chance to counterattack any enemy when they attack an ally. And his skill 1 has a 35% chance to stun. So by having Xingshi in here, it gives me a lot better chance to stun the enemies and gain control. Now, I didn't check this particular stage. I've used some variations on this team. If you need to have a stripper in there, then you could switch out like the Mantora for Chaiwu, Tiana, whoever your stripper is. Aquila is actually a good fit here as well because he's got that. If you put Aquila in Despair, he's got his AoE strip with Despair, and then his skill 2 is also going to buff your attack and your crit rate. So Fran is giving you an attack buff, but it's only 2 turns, and she doesn't buff the crit rate. Anyway, this is the team. I did all the explanation in advance because it's a slow team. We're just going to auto, and I'm just going to run it on fast forward so you can see how it works. Last thing to note, if you're looking at not having one of these monsters, Mantora is replaceable with pretty much anything that's going to give you additional AoE defense break or AoE slow. Something even like Spectra. Spectra has that AoE attack bar reduction and slow, and it's a very common TOAH monster, just like Mantora is. That would work. I think there's, which one is it? The Wind Taoist has an AoE slow. So your preference is going to be AoE defense break, but anything that gives you AoE attack bar manipulation, and very importantly, that can take a few hits, will work in that spot. In the case of Annabelle, again, any kind of AoE healer or combination healer immunity, so like a Delphoy would work, a Veligul would work. Preferably, you're going to have a second water monster in there to split the damage away from Theo. But if you can't put in a water healer, you could also change out. It doesn't have to be Theo. Now, we use Theo because of the element neutrality, and he's my primary damage dealer on this team. But you could use a Perna, you could use an Odin, maybe. You'd have to get something else in there to stack him. So maybe instead of Annabelle and Theo, you could go with Amelia and Odin. But basically, anything that can take a few hits, preferably if it has Resurrect or Death Prevention, just in case things go wrong. But anything that can tank a few hits and give you big damage output would work in that spot. Oki would probably work. Not as big a damage output, but he's got AoE crowd control. As a matter of fact, Oki would also work in place of Mantora. So the basic concept of this team is you want to have 2 healers, you want to have at least 1, but preferably 2 AoE attack breaks. You want to have something that's going to give you stun and crowd control. So in this case, I'm using Xingshi and Mantora for the stuns. And then you need at least 1 major damage dealer, and that damage dealer cannot be too squishy, because if it dies off on the first or second wave, you're in for like a 10-15 minute fight, or you're just going to fail. Okay, so there you have it. Now, you might have noticed that I did a little bit of ooh, nice. Violent? Something hey, nice. So you might have noticed that I did a little bit of targeting in that last round. One thing I forgot is that I had more will runes on these monsters when I was using this team. And so if you saw that, John provoked me. But you would want to have will on your Fran, your Annabelle, and your Theo at a minimum. If you could put will on the Mantora, or of course the replacements for those, then that's fine as well. But at a minimum, you want will runes on your healers so that they don't get provoked the way I did. I think I did not. I showed the Xingshi stats, I believe. I don't know if I showed the Theomar stats. He's the new one. So I actually just lowered his stats a little bit also. I don't use him all that often, just occasionally in Siege, so I stole a rune from him. But you do, the biggest difference is he lost about 200 defense, and I could see that in the fight. He was getting beat up a little bit there. But you do want to make sure your Theo is going to be, you know, over 20k HP, 1k defense, or whomever your primary damage dealer is. Should be over 20k HP, 1k defense. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next. Okay, for this next one, we're going to do a rescue stage. Now, this team here can auto, but because of the way rescue works, having to protect that monster, I usually just manual it. You'll notice we've got some common theme monsters here. These guys that are really good TOAH monsters are also really good Labyrinth monsters. So we're using our Water Homunculus and our Mantora again, and our Fran again. You've seen all the stats of those three earlier in the video. The only new addition here is Charlotte. And so here's the Charlotte stats. She's in a in a damage dealer build, Despair as well. And the reason we brought in Charlotte was for that added ability to stun. The less turns that the enemy monsters get on a rescue stage, the better. Now, there's some other alternatives you could use here. I use Kamoon quite a bit because he's got an opportunity to shield the monster that you're protecting. But I did find that this team just clears faster, basically. So if you use Kamoon in place of like the Mantora, then you'll be just as safe, but you won't clear quite as fast. You can see how fast I went through that first wave because I get the AoE defense break from the Mantora. Now the second wave will be slower because I'm going to try and save my cooldowns. So I'll start off with an AoE slow right here. I'm going to steal the attack bar. There's a very specific sequence in which I'm using those skills. If you noticed, I used the skill 3 Mantora and the skill 2 Charlotte on the first and the skill 2 Water Homunculus on the first. That set me up on the second wave to use my AoE slow with Mantora, steal everyone's attack bar, and now put all the DOTs on with the Water Homunculus. And we will probably just... Do we miss any of the slows? We did not, so I think we'll just go skill 1 over here. And we'll do that on one of these Shiwas. And what we're going to try and do now is just control the attack bar of the fire monsters so that there's less chance of our Shannon getting hit. So we'll keep working on these fire monsters. If the Shannon does get hit, now we will go ahead and probably try for a stun. We got the stun, that's good. We'll go ahead and just heal our Shannon back on the next turn. This should kill both of the Shiwas, or with the DOTs it will. We're going to go ahead and hold on to our heal for the next turn because we're thinking about cooldowns. We will use our AoE attack here just because we wanted to make sure those DOTs finished everybody off. And at this point now, we've got only 2 monsters left that are going to live, and we can just keep working those 2 down. Last one's frozen. So far we've only taken really 1 hit on our Shannon, and all of our cooldowns are set up perfectly for this stage. Now, because there is a Chaiwu there, we're going to have to control the Chaiwu just to make sure we don't get dispelled. The stun actually did the trick for us. And we will just steal some attack bar, and then we'll come back around and use the skill 2 next. We can put up our DOTs, which will also kill about half the wave. Or a little bit more. We can put up some defense, and then we can just auto out from here. So again, I could have autoed. This team would probably have an 80-90% success rate with auto, but that wave 2 with the Shiwas, if you didn't use the exact skill sequence, then your Shannon is exposed. Okay, we're on a cool time level here. The concept of this team should be pretty straightforward, and I don't think it really needs a lot of explanation. I am going to have to quit at the end of the stage because I'm down to 1 lantern. These stages, I use a cleave team, basically, for lack of a better term, and so I do manual them. Now, the key here is that my Sabrina and my Shayna are both very slow. So with the Charlotte attack bar boost, they would get a turn on the first wave and a turn on the third wave, but not on the second wave, because Charlotte can only use her skill 3 1 time if I kill everything. And so we switched in the Verd. I used to use a Maruna, the fire twin, for the AoE stun and some extra damage. But every now and then I would wipe on that second wave once I slowed my twins down. In order to go first on Hell mode, your speed needs to be over, I think, 206, something around there. And my twins are about 160. I don't think they would even act first on hard mode, even with the Galleon speed lead. So we bring in the Verd. This guarantees that all of our twins are going to go first. And this is why we manual. So we go ahead and just use our Charlotte. This will pretty much clear the entire wave. The Water Samurai will survive just because of the attribute advantage, but it doesn't really matter. It's a very straightforward, very quick clearing of the wave right here. So we'll go ahead to the final wave, and then as soon as I have control of that wave, I'll quit out. But once again, we're doing the same thing here. We're using Verd to attack bar boost our twins up over the enemies. This time we'll go ahead and steal the attack bar. Doesn't actually make any difference if you use the skill 2 or the skill 3 for Charlotte. Unfortunately, because my twins are so slow in this particular comp, my Charlotte's not really serving as much purpose because she's not getting that the defense break ahead. In the past, my Shayna was actually faster than Charlotte, and I cleared these waves even faster. So if I slowed Charlotte down to about 155, I think my Shayna is 160. So if I slowed Charlotte down to 155, then I would be clearing these stages even a little bit faster, but as you can see, it still goes by pretty fast. I'm talking into the camera and not even paying attention. I just attacked a water monster with a fire monster twice. Made no difference. So we'll go ahead and clear that stage, and then it's going to be the exact same thing here. Now, you see that Samantha there in the middle. This is one of the few stages where I would actually have to use my Charlotte skill 2 to make sure that the Samantha is stunned, and then I would drop the Orions instead. Ooh, we didn't get the stun. So at this point, I would just nuke out the rest of the wave and deal with the Samantha. But you can see how this team works. It's very straightforward. Are there monsters that you could switch? Yeah, the Charlotte could be changed for almost anything. She could be changed for Varad. She could be changed for Bastet. Really anything that's going to give you some sort of AoE control or some sort of AoE attack bar boost or AoE stun. You could probably even change her out for a Jean. You could probably run the team with just 4 monsters, to be honest. You could run just Galleon and the 2 twins and Verd, or you could put in Maruna in place of Charlotte. There's a lot of different options. Charlotte is there just as a backup to, she's like a safety net for me, just in case there's a lot of water monsters in that particular stage and the Shayna is not doing damage. Charlotte gives me that AoE attack to water. That's why I use her. So lots of different options to replace Charlotte. Not a whole lot of options to replace the Shayna and the Sabrina. Well, the Sabrina you could replace with any boomerang, honestly. We use Sabrina because she's different attribute and she gives Shayna additional attack power and defense, but or I should say damage reduction. But Shayna is really the key to this because she gives me the AoE defense break, the AoE stun. Galleon is a secondary defense breaker. And the other thing that Galleon is doing is the attack buff. Is he critical? No. If you saw in the second wave, I didn't have Galleon's time to loot skill, and I had no problem. It took an extra few seconds to clear the wave, but Galleon's absolutely not necessary. All that is necessary is that your Verd is over 200 and whatever, 206 speed. You could look it up on a wiki, I never did, but just slightly over 200. So as long as your Verd is fast enough to go first, and you have a Shayna in there, the other 3 monsters almost truly don't even matter. And of course, as long as you have enough damage to clear the waves. And I will show my my twins damage here. So the Sabrina, and if you can't match this damage output in Violent, by the way, then it's totally fine to use Fatal or Rage for this purpose. Really for any purpose, honestly, for twins. Fatal and Rage is fine. Violent is just like a redundant dirt protection that I use for my farming. But you should easily be able to match these stats in a Fatal set or a Violent set. For Shayna, same thing. I mean, plus 991 attack and 153 crit damage. She's not really doing any damage. The accuracy and the crit rate, not quite as important for Labyrinth either. The accuracy is important. The crit rate, not quite as much. And then this is the Galleon Shield Will Revenge. This is just my PvP Galleon. My PvE Galleon is a little bit slower, so we use the faster one for this stage. Okay, for normal mode, we've got 2 team options here. Our first team option is basically the exact same thing that we just did on the cool time stage. The only difference is that we're using Mantora here instead of Charlotte. Honestly, I don't even remember why. I think it's probably just like I was having fun one day. Like I said, the Charlotte really could change out for anything. The Mantora is probably there for element neutrality. That's the only thing I could think of, but it doesn't really matter. Mantora, Charlotte, anything that gives you AoE crowd control is fine. Then I've got a second team here, which is going to be used for auto. So this first team, because it has the twins, which are squishy, this is a manual team, and it's a little bit faster. The second team is for auto. It's a little bit slower. I've shown the stats of all these monsters except the Oki so far, so here's the Oki. And the basic concept behind this team is that Oki adds an additional element of crowd control. So he's going to give me that AoE stun, he's got the skill reset, he turn cycles himself. He's also a damage dealer. And then we're using Fran for attack bar boosting, Fran and Annabelle together for heal, Annabelle and Mantora together for AoE defense break, and then the Homunculus for some additional damage. Well, the Homunculus is our primary AoE damage dealer. So there's no point in me demonstrating the Twins team again because it works the exact same as it did on the cooldown mode. So we'll demonstrate our auto team, but once again, I am going to have to quit out on that final stage just to, the last thing we have left is Explode. So I'll quit out on the final stage to conserve that lantern, and then we'll go do Explode. Okay, there we go. I wanted to play it out far enough just to be clear that the team had control on this stage. This is probably one of the toughest normal levels, I think. Anyway, those tractors are a giant pain, and then obviously all the sleep on this final stage. We'll go ahead just so you can see where the cooldowns are, just so you know that I had control. So we had our skill 3 Mantora, and then we have our Fran. I just want to make sure I don't accidentally kill anything. And then we were back to our skill 3 Oki, which would have stunned everything and given us an opportunity to heal with Annabelle. So even on the auto team, we did have control here. Now, was Oki a great fit for this level? Absolutely not. Charlotte would have been much, much better for this level, as would a lot of other different crowd control types. But the idea of an auto team is hopefully that you're picking one team that can just go through every level. Some levels it's not as great of a fit, some levels it's perfect, but the idea is that we're not spending a ton of time on these levels. And of course, you can set up a few different teams in your quick picks. So if we wanted to swap out Oki for Charlotte, or if you have Varad, I don't, but Varad would have been a great pick for this stage. Okay, so for the Explode stage, I've got 2 team options, but I don't think, I never set up a quick pick for the other one. The first team option is the same thing that we used in Cool Time. The catch is that without the Maruna, so I used to use a 3-twin team on the Cool Time stage, and if you can run Galleon with 3 twins plus Charlotte, you can kill each of the waves in under 10 turns, which is how long you have for the bomb to explode on Hell mode with no problem. But when you're using Verd, and especially if you're using both Verd and Sabrina, you only have one AoE attacker, which is that Shayna. And because my Shayna is not doing as much damage as my other monsters, every now and then the bomb would catch up to me on the second wave. So I switched up the team a little bit. Here we've got 2 AoE attackers, which are Poseidon and, we've got 3 AoE attackers, really. Charlotte's in a crit damage build too. So we've got Poseidon, Water Homunculus, and Charlotte. I've shown everybody's stats so far, I think, except for Poseidon. So he's in Despair Will. You can see he's a slightly hybrid built. He's actually in attack slot 6, but really heavy on the HP and defense subs. Again, we're looking for something that can tank just a little bit. So we traded some crit rate for tankiness. So we've got Poseidon and Charlotte, who are both AoE crowd controllers. They can reduce attack bar, they can silence and stun. My Water Homunculus skill 2 is also absorb attack bar. So this entire team is built around controlling the enemy so that they don't get any hits off. We've got just our one healer, and she's really there more for attack power buff and immunity than anything else. And then we've got our AoE defense breaker and Mantora. Speed tuning with this team is important. The Mantora goes first at 240. And when I say speed tuning, actually that's the only thing that really matters, is your defense breaker and your attack buffer need to go first. Now, obviously we're getting into, there's two Nat 5s here that a lot of people may not have, the Poseidon and the Charlotte. So what are the alternatives? It's the same thing I've been saying for the whole video. Find anything that's going to give you some AoE crowd control or AoE attack bar manipulation. And if you lack either of those, AoE nukers or AoE slow. But basically what we want is some sort of AoE attack break, and then we want AoE attacks to follow up with it. And preferably we want to allow ourselves to attack as often as we can, if that's reducing the enemy attack bar or if that's increasing our own attack bar. Now, the explode stages for me are a manual team. You could auto it, or this team could auto it, but it would probably fail almost half the time, just because you really, I mean, you've only got 10 turns to kill everything, so you really need all of the cooldowns to be used properly, and the AI is just not that smart. So we're going to be using kind of the same concept we talked about earlier, which is where we use the Mantora skill 3 with the Charlotte skill 2, or vice versa. And then Poseidon, in this case, he's actually just basically a nuker. And you can see that one went pretty smooth. We want to reduce these beta attack bars. We want to slow them. And then we're going to silence them with Poseidon. And hopefully the betas never get a chance to use their immunity. So if the betas do get that immunity up, then we're going to be losing one monster on this stage, which is pretty much the norm. Because I've only got one AoE defense breaker here, I'll lose a monster on the second wave about half the time. That's one of the benefits of the homunculus. We are hoping that he's the one the bomb explodes on, because then he'll just resurrect and stay with us until the next stage. The Fran procs here have been killing me. That's her third proc, and every one of those was a dead attack, which is why I'm going to see the bomb go off here. We have enough DOTs that everything will die. So it's really just let the bomb go off. We lost the Charlotte. And this is the other reason that we use both Poseidon and Charlotte. Now, with the Charlotte dead, Poseidon is going to serve her role next time. So I did not use my homunculus skill 2 there because I really want the enemies to go now. They're all stunned and they have DOT. And so we're just waiting for them to get a turn so that they all die. And so we'll move into the final stage with 4. But we're moving in with all of our... skills 3 available. So we got our AoE defense break, we steal the attack bars, we'll steal some more attack bars, and you can see they're pretty much almost dead already. Even at this point, if a bomb were to go off on me, I'd still be fine. As a matter of fact, I can just auto out from here. So that's how this team goes. Again, it's not an auto team, it's a manual team, but it's a pretty safe team. I don't think I've lost with this team. The worst case scenario for you is that you lose Mantora on the second wave and you lose your defense break, and then that third wave tends to be a really long fight. You have to keep controlling the attack bar of whatever the boss monster is on the third wave, and you may wind up losing 1 or 2 monsters to bombs on the third wave as well, but it still goes by fairly quickly. Okay, so we got a will grind, speed, attack, sweet, mana. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions, obviously please leave them in the comments down below. Please remember, as with all these videos, the idea is not that you use the exact monsters that I'm showing, but that you use monsters that do the same things as the monsters I'm using. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, please pop that subscribe button over on the left. It shows me that you enjoyed the video, but more importantly, it shows me that you found the information useful and hopefully it helped you in your gameplay. So here's the deal. You pop subscribe and I'll keep popping out content. Thanks guys.